Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of the Beatles class, and I hope you're having a good time with everything that we've been doing so far. You've probably noticed that there's a lot of listening and kind of a lot of reading to do, but we need to get good background, to get us to a certain point in this class, and there's a lot of stuff that happens early on in the Beatles' career that we need to talk about, so hopefully you're keeping up with that stuff. Now, in week 3, you'll see from your reading and some of your listening that we're kind of around the period of 1960 to 1962. And this was kind of a fallow period, I guess you could say. There's a lot of important things that happened, but there was nothing that was like overwhelmingly eventful, like we see later on in their career. They're in England to begin with. They're touring around. They've gone up to Scotland. They're kind of hitting the daily grind of gigging and being a musician. The lineup keeps having, changes, and it's hard to get any kind of stability and get any kind of footing. Now, the three core guys at this point, George, Paul, and John, are together, and they're all kind of working towards a common goal. But they have these auxiliary people around them that they have to keep relying on and using, and, it's just an uncomfortable situation for them. Now, the big thing that happens in 1960 is they're actually going to Hamburg, Germany. So this, to me, is a very, very pivotal point in their career. Now, Hamburg, Germany, at this time, is a wide open city. It's kind of like Storyville in New Orleans in the turn of the century, 20th century, 1900, around there. And you could compare it to San Francisco in the 60s. It's always, there's always cities in certain periods of time that have a kind of a cultural burst, I guess you could say. Even though there's a lot of prostitution, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of organized crime, there's a lot of seedy things going on, but it's in those situations that you always find artists and more particularly musicians. No joke. Musicians just seem to gravitate toward that stuff, I guess, And anyway, so in Hamburg, this is where they really start to become a band, okay? This is where they get that first taste of, being professional musicians, always playing, not having to worry about a day job, not having to worry about school or anything like that. They have, there's this gig that just is 6 days a week, and it's all they have to do. They just have to play music. Now, at this point, Ringo's not in the band yet. It's still Pete Best, who has become the most stable drummer they've had to date. So we don't see Ringo yet, but the other three guys are really forming a bond. Okay, they're really forming a tight bond. You'll see in your reading that Pete is a little bit on the outside of things, but the other three guys are kind of together on everything. Now, it's really important for any musician in their development to have a steady gig, and this Hamburg gig gives the Beatles what they need to develop a sound. Okay, now, we've already listened to their influences. You know about the Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, and all those guys. And they're still playing basically all cover songs. They haven't written a whole lot of their own and not doing a whole lot of their own tunes yet. But they're starting to play them in their own way. They're starting to take that growl of Little Richard and that rock and roll of Chuck Berry and the vocals of the Everly Brothers and the writing of Buddy Holly and all these different stuff. And they're starting to mash them together. So they're getting a hard rocking sound, but they got these great melodies and great background vocals and harmonies going on that really is starting to sound more unique. And this kind of becomes the British sound. This is where everything starts to merge together. The blues, the pop, the R&B, everything starts to kind of, merge together for the Beatles and eventually every other band in Britain at the time. So very important that they have this gig. Now, this first Hamburg trip didn't last a whole long time because George gets booted out because he's underage. And when they get back to England, there's not a whole lot going on. They're kind of like stuck. They're like, not a whole lot of gigs. They're not real happy with the way things are moving. But, and this is my opinion, and you can always argue with me on this, that first Hamburg trip gave them the taste of what it is to make a living at music. That's really where they got the feeling that they are a band, they're professional musicians, and this is definitely what they want to do for the rest of their lives. So that trip kind of gave them the impetus to push through what was a kind of a fallow period after they got back from Hamburg. Now, they would make a couple more trips back to Hamburg between 1960 and 1962, some of which recordings I got you some very rare bootleg recordings of Hamburg in 1962. I hope you like it. But you'll hear how tight they are starting to become and how they're really developing their own sound. So that Hamburg trip, again, not to beat a dead horse here, that Hamburg trip is what really gave them that oomph to get through this rough period that they come back to in Liverpool in 1960, and to keep them moving ahead until they finally get their manager and things start falling into place. But they had to go through a rough patch, and it was definitely a rough patch. So a couple key points to keep in mind here, okay? Number one, the 1960 trip to Hamburg, pivotal point, really gives them the taste of what it is to be a professional musician. Number two, it gives them a daily practice, basically, on stage, learning over 600 songs, playing together all day and night, working on harmonies, working on their individual talents and all that stuff. So major move ahead with that regular gig, okay? It also gave them a taste of a different culture. They get out of Liverpool finally, and they see what things are like outside of that small world that they were in. So it was eye-opening in that sense as well. It gives them a more worldly view of things. So the Beatles are really growing up at this point. And make sure you watch the videos that are going to be right below this video. Check that out, because you're going to see them talk about the Hamburg. You're going to see some other clips of things that were going on at the time. Very important period of time. So try and stay on top of everything. I know it's a lot of stuff, a lot of reading, a lot of listening. But if you have any questions, regardless if it goes back to week one, I don't care. Ask me questions, email me, text me, whatever you got to do. But let me know, okay? And have a good time with it, and I'll see you next week.